Whether you want to start a career in the agile space or you just want to give yourself a little bit of job security, you absolutely must get Scrum Master certified. In this world of AI and large language models, product development is happening faster than ever. And that means there's a huge need for individuals who know how to facilitate team-based product development life cycles. And that is what being a Scrum Master is all about. And that is why I've put this 80-question Scrum Master Certification practice exam together to help you get Scrum Master certified. Now, let me say right off the bat, this is not a set of brain dumps. This is not a set of cheat questions for the exam. There's lots of cheat sites out there. If you want to cheat your way to Scrum Master certification, well, choose your own adventure, but I gotta tell you, you won't last a minute in the world of agile if you think that cheating your way through these certification exams is gonna do yourself any good. What you need is you need to understand Scrum. You need to understand iterative and incremental product development. And that's why I've put this exam together for you, not to simply help you pass the Scrum Master certification exam. I guarantee it, you will if you understand the answer to these questions, the discussions that we have around them. But my goal isn't simply to help you understand the answers to these questions, but to help you build a very deep and fundamental understanding of what Scrum is and how Scrum works. Now, here's a couple of tips as we go into this practice exam. First of all, I would recommend that you watch this a couple of times. Watch it once just as you're getting started in your certification journey, and then watch it again right before you go in to write the exam. It'll help you a lot. The other thing I would say is I tend to speak very clearly, so feel free to put this on 1.5 or 2x speed, and then watch it when you go for a walk, listen to it in the car, watch it when you go work out on the treadmill. You'll at least get all of the different ideas and topics into your mind, and you'll do it very, very quickly. The other thing I'll say is that most of the questions here come out of two resources, well, maybe three. I would say one, they come out of the Scrum Guide. Okay, so your number one study resource is the Scrum Guide. Download it, it's free. Number two, Darcy DeClute's Scrum Master Certification Guide. If you're serious about product owner or Scrum Master certification, that is definitely the book to get. That is the book that I read. I got PSM1 certified and I got PSM2 certified and product owner certified based on the information in that book. The other thing I would say is that the questions here, well, they come from the Scrum Guide. They come from Darcy DeClute's Scrum Master Certification Guide, which you can get on Amazon. And three, from scouring the scrum.org forums. Some of the most brilliant minds in Scrum contribute to that forum, and you can get great insights into how Scrum works. So I highly recommend that you go over there and check that out. I would also say there's CSM certification and there is Scrum.org certification. Scrum.org certification doesn't require you to take classes. You can just go in, get certified, prove your knowledge, and boom, there you go. The others, they force you to take training. It seems like a money grab to me. So as far as I'm concerned, the most respectable certification out there is the one from scrum.org. But this set of exam certification exam questions will cover you for either the CSM or the PSM1 and PSM2 exams as well. Anyways, with all of that said, let's get started. Let's start with question number one. Okay, I've got my glasses on, so you know I mean business. Let's start this exam. If you want to follow along, head over to certificationexams.guru and you'll find at the bottom of the page there's a link to Scrum Master and Product Owner exams. Hey, there's Darcy DeClute staring back at us. I'm going to click on Get Started here, and I'm going to click on the 80-question exam, and boom, instantaneously it loads. Boy, this is a fast and efficient website, and it asks us our first question. It says, it has come to the attention of the PO that quality gates are failing and important non-functional requirements are not being met after increments are released. The product owner wants to change the definition of done to include more stringent, non-functional requirements. How should the product owner proceed? By the way, non-functional requirements are things like speed, like performance, things like just the quality of the code. So we want to fix things up. So how do we do it? How do we address non-functional stuff? Have the Scrum team create a new definition of done during the next daily Scrum. No, you don't want to do that during the daily Scrum because you've already got a sprint backlog and you're creating content based on an existing definition of done. That would just throw the whole sprint into disarray. Have the Scrum team create a new definition of done during the next sprint planning meeting. Sprint planning meeting, you can't really plan stuff unless you've got a definition of done. So you want to be solid on that before the sprint planning meeting. So I'm going to say no. And by the way, if you're playing the home game, if you right click on any of these options, it grays out. That just can help you eliminate incorrect choices. Work with a team to create a new definition of done after the current sprint ends, but before the next sprint begins. Trick question, there is nothing between the time when a sprint ends and the next sprint begins because the next sprint begins immediately after this sprint ends. Use the sprint retrospective to change the current definition of done. And I believe that's the correct answer. I'm going to check it. I'm also going to click that cheat button. And boom, when I click the cheat button, the green line goes around it. I get an interesting answer. It says the sprint retrospective is the correct time to discuss the DOD and change the definition of done. You can't change the DOD prior to the sprint retrospective because work is still being done. And you end up with a scenario where you end up with moving the goalpost mid-sprint. Keep in mind that sprints should be short, so it will never be more than 4 weeks before a new sprint begins. Furthermore, you don't want to negotiate a definition of done during sprint planning because developers might subconsciously game the definition to make it easier to convert difficult product backlog items into an increment. I hadn't even thought about that. So check out that cheat button and check out those answers if you want more details on why a given answer is correct. Question 2. Which of the following is the most accurate description of Scrum as defined by the Scrum Guide? A complete, incremental, and iterative software development process. First of all, it's not complete, it's incomplete. And secondly, you're not allowed to call it a process. The gatekeepers in Scrum, who are an angry, nasty group of people, will berate you and belittle you for calling it a process, even though arguably it is, and also in previous Scrum guides, they did call it a process. But don't call it a process on the exam. It's an incomplete, incremental, and iterative software development process. Again, that's close, but it uses that P word. The Scrumentologists will berate you for that. We always talk about being friendly and supportive on our Scrum teams, but I always find the Scrum people on the LinkedIn community are some of the most vile people out there. A purposeful, incomplete, lightweight framework to help find solutions to complex problems. I like that one a lot. A purposefully complete lightweight framework to help find solutions for complex problems. That is incorrect. So I think that's right out of the Scrum Guide. It is a purposefully incomplete lightweight framework to help find solutions for complex problems. Notice it doesn't talk about software development, doesn't even talk about product development right there. Just it's to help you find solutions for complex problems. Again, a quote right out of the Scrum Guide. There's no arguing with that. Okay, let's go to the next question. Successful Scrum teams often create a sub-team of testers and QAs to test increments before they are released into production. The answer to this is absolutely false. Scrum teams don't create sub-teams. There's only one Scrum team. They don't create different roles like QAs and testers. Everyone on that team is equal. Everyone on that team is a developer or a product owner or a Scrum Master. We don't create sub-teams. We have developers and we create cross-functional skills so everyone on the team knows how to test. Everyone on the team knows how to do QA. I know in reality, you've probably got a team where it's got some people that specialize in QA and people who specialize in testers, and maybe some organizations have even created exclusive teams to do that, but that is not the Scrum way to do it. You have a team of 8 developers at most, then maybe a Scrum Master and a PO, then a Scrum Master and a PO, maybe 10 people on the team, and the team works together to do all of the things that are required. And specifically, things that go towards development would be done by the developers. So that is definitely false. Let's go to question number 4. Okay, we've got a product owner who has no idea how complicated or complex a PBI will be. PBI, product backlog item. Whose responsibility is it to decompose a long, epic product backlog item into easily digestible work items that should take no more than a day to complete? A business analyst, a product owner, a scrum master, a team lead, or the developers on the team? It's the developers on the team. Who knows development? The product owner doesn't know how to develop stuff. They're just a product owner. They have a vision, but they don't know how to do the actual work. They're not developers. The Scrum Master is not a developer, right? How could a Scrum Master break a complicated task down into smaller, more easily manageable and digestible tasks if they don't know the fundamentals of building the product? It's not a building analyst. It's not a team lead. We don't have those on the Scrum team. The developers are the ones who do that. And again, it's right out of the Scrum Guide. It's their job. It's the job of the developers to decompose long, epic product backlog items into easily digestible work items that hopefully can get accomplished in about a day. Did we get that correct? When we cheat, the green ones are the ones that we've got right. And we're on question 5. We got the first 4 correct, so we are cooking with gas. The Scrum development team is responsible for what? Being self-managed and dealing professionally with things. Of course, pushing to always increase development velocity. Development velocity is never mentioned once in the Scrum Guide, and we're not always go, pushing for faster. Maybe we push for better, but not faster. Planning how to complete the work in the sprint backlog. That's their job, right? You want to complete the work in the sprint backlog. Might not all get done, but you want to complete it. Finish as many story points in a sprint as possible. Now again, the term story point never appears once in the Scrum Guide. If you see story points listed on a question on the Scrum Master Certification exam or the Product Owner Certification exam, it's a red herring. It's probably wrong. We don't have story points in Scrum. Now, Scrum's a lightweight framework, and you can do Scrum any way you want. So if story points help you, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's never mentioned in the Scrum Guide, and it's not one of the suggested practices. Okay, I'm doing just a very quick interruption here. A couple of things. The YouTube algorithm hates me for some reason right now. If you're enjoying this video, if you could like, subscribe, and even leave a comment, I would really love to hear from you and find out if you've enjoyed this. It'll also help wake up the YouTube algorithm and maybe give my channel and my videos a little bit more exposure. So I would really appreciate that. The other thing too is I got a new copy of Hibernate Made Easy coming out, the best-selling book. I've updated it for version 7 of Hibernate. So if you're into JPA, Spring Data, Spring JDBC, please sign up for my mailing list. You don't have to buy it, but I'll be raffling off some free copies for members of my newsletter. And I'll also be making chapters available through the newsletter as well. So sign up for that. There's a link in the description. And finally, I helped out with some final edits on Darcy DeClute's Scrum Master Certification Guide. So if you're agile and you're working with Scrum and you're interested in getting Scrum Master certified, a lot of people have been using this book to score 100% on the Product Owner and Scrum Master exam. So it's available on Amazon. Go pick that up. I know Darcy would be very happy if you did. Okay, that's it. I'm really sorry to bother you. Let's get back into the coding. Question 6, which of the following actions should the Scrum Master never do? Tell the developers how to manage their workloads. So they should never tell the developers how to manage their workloads. Which of the following actions should the Scrum Master never do? So they should never tell the Scrum developers how to manage their workloads. They should never extend the length of the sprint. They should never end the sprint early. Anytime you see the word coach, facilitate, something like that on the exam, something friendly, helpful, mentor, it's usually the right answer, because that's what a Scrum Master does. They're a coach, they're a mentor. So coach the development team, that's something they should do. Reprimand developers who underperform, absolutely not. That's not how we deal with underperformers in Scrum. So how did I do? Looks like we nailed that one. On to question 7. Under what circumstances can the Scrum Master speak directly with stakeholders? I'm going to ask you to go back to the Scrum values right now and remember that one of them is openness. So under what circumstance can the Scrum Master speak directly with stakeholders? After the product owner gives the Scrum Master permission, when the product owner is failing to fulfill the responsibilities, during the sprint review when everybody's together, during the sprint retrospective, or there are no rules forbidding the Scrum Master from speaking with stakeholders at any time. For goodness sakes, there are no rules about a Scrum Master not speaking to somebody. One of the rules of Scrum is openness, and we want to be open at all times. You've got a developer who wants to speak with a stakeholder. You've got a developer who wants to talk to management. You've got management who wants to talk with a developer. If people want to talk about something, go right ahead. Talk about it. There's no rules. If developers say, hey, you know that feature you wanted, I did it and it looks super cool. Go check it out. You don't have to wait for the sprint review to do that. Like we're human beings here. We respect each other. We're all working towards a common goal. We want the product to be developed. We want to share in each other's successes. And if there's a problem, we want to be able to iron it out, right? We want openness throughout the entire team and the entire organization. So certainly, you're not going to find rules in the Scrum Guide about when not to talk to somebody. Openness is one of the Scrum values, and we want to embrace it. Okay, next. Question number 8. Scrum practitioners are encouraged to focus on the current sprint. And while the product goal should always be top of mind, Scrum does not plan 2 or 3 sprints into the future. This is an example of which Scrum value. Are these all values? I don't think courage is a value. Respect, focus. Oh, it's definitely focus, right? We want to focus on the current sprint. We don't even like to think much about the next sprint. I think there's only one part in the Scrum Guide where they talk about the next sprint, and it's only about the fact that in a retrospective that you can, think about improvements that you can do in the next sprint. So we want to focus on the current sprint backlog. We want to focus on what we're doing through this iterative cycle because things change and, you have no idea what you might be doing in the next sprint. Okay, so that's focus. During sprint planning, Scrum developers choose the various product backlog items they believe they can transform into a usable and valuable increment before the sprint ends. What level of effort and resolve must Scrum developers put into completing the sprint backlog items they have chosen for the sprint? The developers will work at a sustainable pace in order to complete as many sprint backlog items as is possible in conformance with the definition of done. I like that a lot. Notice the word sustainable pace. I'm not sure. Does that come out of the Scrum Guide? It might. If not, it's out of the Agile Manifesto. Either way, that's how we want to work at a sustainable pace and do as much work as we can. Developers must put in all the effort required to successfully complete all backlog items. It's not going to happen. You're not always going to be able to complete all backlog items. The developers must commit to delivering core functionality, but testing and quality is not required. Are you joking? Yet quality testing, that's all part of the definition of done, and that's what the developers do. So that's a wrong answer. The developers must complete the selected backlog items in accordance with the definition of done, and also provide unit testing, technical documentation, and also pass any QA routines. Well, if these things here aren't part of the definition of done, then it's not necessary, but certainly those are things that you would normally do. This says only choose one. I think that first one is the correct answer. Although that last one, I mean, I don't know what's exactly wrong with it. It's just the fact that also provide unit testing, technical documentation, pass any QA routines. Again, if that's not part of the definition of done, then it's not necessary. Keep in mind as well that, well, with Scrum, it's a product development framework. And one of the big things they push is that Scrum is not just about software. Now, we usually think about software, but according to the people that manage Scrum, they want you to be using Scrum for building a house. They want you to be using Scrum for manufacturing a car. They want you to be using Scrum for building any product. And so, maybe not every product has a technical documentation requirement or does unit testing. I don't know, when you build a car, is there unit testing there? So those are very software development terms, and that might be one more reason why that option is not correct. Okay, question 10. Let's be honest here. What are the 3 ways the definition of done helps to increase transparency throughout the organization? The definition of done provides clear expectations for developers and stakeholders. So important. I think earlier when there was a question about changing the definition of done mid-sprint. You don't want to change the goalposts. The developers need to know what's expected, and the stakeholders need to know what to expect. The definition of done helps to provide helps the product owner identify when the developers are underperforming. No. The definition of done provides objective criteria that allows teams to know when a product backlog item is complete and can be released. I like that. The Scrum Guide doesn't talk about release. So I always get worried when I see, a release sprint, a release. But here it says can be released, not will be released, must be released. You can release anything anytime you want, right? But you don't have to. The definition of done helps stakeholders know when a task or feature will be complete. When? Time-based? No. There's no guarantee on time in the definition of done. The definition of done provides a shared understanding throughout the organization. And that is definitely what the definition of done is all about. Okay, question 11. When should newly identified work or additional information about the work be added to the sprint backlog? New insight about the sprint plan should be added to the sprint backlog immediately. Yeah, why would you wait? If I've got to build a product and I find out that there's these 3 other things that need to be done to build it, why would I not add that information immediately? Why would I wait for the daily Scrum, the retrospective? If you got new information, add it immediately, right? Don't wait for a ceremony to do something. I always often, one of the greatest parts of Darcy DeClute's book is she's got an example where she says, think about Scrum as if you were building a shelter on a deserted island. And a poisonous snake comes into the shelter. When do you tell everybody about it, right? Do you tell them at the daily Scrum, the sprint retro, or do you shout there's a poisonous snake in the camp right friggin' now? You share that information immediately. When the product owner agrees, the product owner is not a developer. They don't necessarily know about the sprint backlog. The sprint backlog is owned by the developers. Sprint backlog items can only be added during sprint planning. No, the sprint goal is solidified in sprint planning, but the sprint backlog can be changed and updated at any point in time during the daily Scrum on approval from the team lead. If you find something new, just add it in. As I said, if you see a snake on the campground, you don't wait to the daily Scrum to tell everybody about it, right? You tell everybody about it right now. Okay, question 12. And again, if you're interested in getting Scrum Master certified, purchase Darcy DeClute's Scrum Master Certification Guide on Amazon. It's worth every penny. A sprint planning meeting is one of Scrum's time-boxed events. What is the time box for sprint planning? You just got to know this. And these are easy questions to get if you just memorize the fact that a sprint planning meeting is a maximum of 8 hours. I would always just actually get these mixed up. I know it's 8 hours, but sometimes I would think it would be 4 or something like that, or 3 because of the reviewer spec. Just memorize them. Okay, cheating, how am I doing here? 12 out of 12, correct. You've just acquired a new company, and 2 of their Scrum teams will be added to your project to help build the company's flagship product. How should the teams be organized? So, a new company, 2 of their Scrum teams are coming on to help your project, to help the company's flagship product. What do? Have the Scrum Master create 3 new teams with an equal combination of experience, seniority, and technical skill? No. Keep the teams in their initial state and allow them to self-organize when the project is complete? Certainly, we should allow them to self-organize whenever they want. I don't know why we have to wait until the project is complete to do that. Keeping them in their initial state might help them with comfort, though. Introduce the teams to each other and have them self-organize into teams of equal size. No rule about teams being equal size in the Scrum Guide. Keep the initial structure and layout of the teams and allow them to self-organize over time. Boom. That's the one that I like. As I said, this one, I liked it, but I was like, why do they have to wait until the project is complete? Yeah, developers should be allowed to self-organize into teams that they like, that they think will make themselves most productive. The Scrum Master doesn't set up things with experience, seniority, technical skill. We let the developers do that. Self-organization is very important in Scrum. Okay, question number 14. Who is responsible for removing barriers between stakeholders and Scrum teams? This is an interesting one because, certainly the product owner is the one who speaks with stakeholders to find out what they need. But when it comes to removing barriers, removing blockers between them, that's the Scrum Master. And the Scrum Master is responsible also for discussing agile, helping with agile transformations, expressing the importance of Scrum and how Scrum works to teams, to organizations. So I would throw the Scrum Master into that one. The Scrum Framework describes a set of time-boxed events, and the Scrum Master is expected to coach the teams on respecting them. What does it mean for an event to be time-boxed? A time box just means it can't go beyond that time. Like the daily Scrum is 15 minutes long, and it just can't go beyond 15 minutes. Once you've hit the 15 minutes, it's time to just say, okay, we're done. We're moving on to something else. And so let's see. It must start at the same time. No. It must take place before a certain hour of the day. There's a minimum amount of time that may transpire. No. There's a maximum amount of time that may transpire between the event starts and finishes. That is what a time box is all about. Number 16, according to the Scrum Guide, the sprint backlog is composed of 3 independent parts. Which of the following items make up the sprint backlog? The sprint backlog has 3 things. The sprint goal, it has an actionable plan, and product backlog items chosen for the sprint. And so it has a sprint goal, correct, an actionable plan, correct, and a set of items that we're going to work on. That is the sprint backlog. So it doesn't have a product goal. The project has a product goal. And the sprint backlog items not completed in the previous sprint. You know what? That's a total red herring too. If something wasn't completed in the previous sprint, it doesn't necessarily go into the next sprint, right? Like when the next sprint starts, there's new sprint planning. You may just say, you know what, that thing that we didn't do last sprint, it's not necessary. It's not a priority. It can wait. So just because something's not done in one sprint doesn't mean it automatically gets put into the next sprint. The developers check that out. So the sprint goal, the sprint backlog, and an actionable plan. And by sprint backlog, that's what we mean by certain product backlog items chosen for the sprint. And boom, we got that correct. Okay, when is a product backlog item considered fully complete and ready for release? Well, I know this one. I know that it's ready when it meets the definition of done, right? That's what everything is all about. So I see definition of done here. A product backlog item is complete when it meets the definition of done and further increments of work on it are no longer possible, making it ready for release. Again, not saying it's going to be released, but ready for release. Certainly that makes sense to me. Product backlog items are never officially complete until the product goal is achieved. That's not true. A product backlog item is complete when all work in the sprint backlog is finished. All work in the sprint backlog related to the item is finished, making it ready for release. No, not necessarily. And a product backlog item is complete when quality assurance team verifies the work passes all acceptance criteria. That might be part of the definition of done, but that is not when it is completed. A product backlog item is complete when it meets the definition of done. Okay, question 18. A directive from the DevOps team states product increments cannot be released unless non-functional requirements for latency, performance, security, and reliability are met. Earlier, I got tongue-tied when I was saying, well, what is a non-functional requirement? A functional requirement is that, something that the product should do, that's very easy to define. The non-functional stuff are things like the latency, performance, security, reliability. So the DevOps team states product increments cannot be released unless non-functional requirements for these things are met. How should the Scrum team deal with non-functional requirements? Create a separate team? No. There's only one team, that's the Scrum team. There's only one set of developers, that's the team developers. Create a second Scrum team to address non-functional? No. Create an integration sprint where non-functional requirements are tested and validated. There's nothing about an integration sprint in the Scrum guide. Include non-functional requirements in the definition of done and make sure every increment satisfies them. That's it. Right? If there's a certain requirement that has to be met in order for a product backlog item to be considered done, well, then we put that information into the definition of done and we make sure that every single product meets that. That's the whole idea of the definition of done. So include non-functional requirements in the DOD. Okay, next question. In the absence of a person with a quality assurance training on the team, what should a group of Scrum developers do about all of these building up QA requirements that somebody has written into the DOD? Have the organization form an external QA team, complete each PBI and exclude QA tasks? Oh, I know teams that have done that. Have the development team train and learn the skills required, or have the product owner remove the quality assurance requirements from the definition of done. It's this one. Have the development team train and learn the skills required to do that. I mentioned Darcy DeClute's book where she has this whole scenario where she teaches you Scrum by using a scenario where people are shipwrecked on an island and need to get off. And one of the questions in there is the product owner says we need a canoe, but nobody on the team knows how to build a stinking canoe. So what do you do? And the answer to the question was, the developers figure out how to build a canoe. You develop the skills. You trial and error. Like, if it's got to get done, it's got to get done. And, you've got to build the skills to do it. That's the whole idea of having a cross-functional team and having a team of developers who are competent enough to learn how to do what needs to be done. So here, just get the developers. I don't know how to do QA. It's like, well, we're going to help teach you how to do QA, and you'll have a brand new skill to add to your skill set. Okay, 20. Which of the following roles or accountabilities are not defined in the Scrum Guide? There's no product manager. There's no quality assurance. There's no project manager either. There's product owners, Scrum Masters. There's no team leads. There's developers. Okay, no developers listed there, so catching me off guard. But by the way, this is something to keep in mind when you hit the Scrum Master Certification exam. When you see something about a product manager, quality assurance team, product manager, project manager, team lead, those are usually wrong because we don't have those in Scrum and none of them are mentioned in the Scrum Guide. The word project manager is never, ever mentioned once in the Scrum Guide. Scrum is not a project management framework. It's a product development framework. And even the Scrum Guide might say it's really just a strategy to help solve complex problems when you're developing products. So yeah, there we go. Let's make sure that we're got everything right. That's our question number 20. 21, the Scrum Guide demands that management allows teams to be self-management and self-organized. What advantages does self-organization offer to Scrum teams and the team members? Increased personal accountability with regards to the work developers perform. So what self-organized does? Yeah, I like that one. Increased accuracy in estimating. Estimates are all wrong in Scrum. We don't really, estimating's not, we try and estimate work. We try and break things down into amount of time that'll be done in a day, but estimates are things that project management wants, and developers on a Scrum team are just focused on getting work done. So often estimating it's a bad word on the Scrum certification exam. Increased personal commitment to the team and the project. I think so. Increased ingenuity and inventiveness when solving problems. I like that one too. Increased ability to comply with industry regulations, rules, and guidelines. I don't think self-organization has much to do with that. So let's see how we did. Okay, we got them all right. Question 22. Let's be honest. Okay, anytime a Scrum team creates a usable increment that meets the definition of done and is approved at the sprint review, the increment must be released into production. Again, I don't think the word release appears once in the Scrum guide. There's no release sprint. You present things to the stakeholders. You have a sprint review. Stakeholders look at it. They tell you whether they like it. Do you have to release it into production? You may not have any production, right? Like you might be just doing software development and creating a POC and there's no production environment at all. So yeah, be careful when they talk about doing releases on the exam because, there's no impetus. There's no need to release things every time they're done or put things into production. You make the things you do part of the product. You integrate your increments into the product. You show it to the customer and make sure the customer likes it and get feedback on it. But releasing to production, you do that when you want, but it's not necessitated by the Scrum guide. Which of the following are essential characteristics of a successful Scrum team? The team has been given the freedom to self-manage. Yes. The team has specialized sub-teams. No. The team is a full-time Scrum Master, dedicated 100% to the team. Nothing in the Scrum guide says a Scrum Master has to be 100% dedicated to the team. It's nice when you've got one like that, but a Scrum Master might work on 3 or 4 teams. So no requirement there. The team has the ability to self-organize. So self-management and self-organization are key. Again, that Scrum Master, nothing says the Scrum Master has to be dedicated to your team 100% of your time. It just says the Scrum Master has to be there when you need them. Which of the following statements, and I don't even think it actually says that, but I think that's an expectation. Which of the following statements are true about the Scrum team? Every Scrum team must have at least one Scrum Master, but the product owner is optional. Incorrect. Every team has a product owner and a Scrum Master. A Scrum developer can work on multiple Scrum teams at the same time. No rules against that. A product owner can only be associated with one Scrum team. No, if multiple teams are working on a product, they'll share the same product owner. So that's incorrect. And the Scrum Master can only be associated with one Scrum team. Again, no impetus from that. No requirement in the Scrum guide. A Scrum developer can be on multiple teams. I've argued this with people, on LinkedIn and stuff, and they're like, oh no, a Scrum developer can only be on one team. I'm like, okay, well, does that mean you can't have a part-time Scrum developer? Like you can't have a developer that works 20 hours a week for you part-time, and then, when they're not working for you, they do something else, maybe some other Scrum team somewhere else. Like, no rule in the Scrum guide that says every Scrum developer has to be a full-time dedicated to your team. That's nice if that happens, not dictated by the Scrum guide. So be careful of questions like that. Okay, question 25. Over time, as a Scrum team becomes more comfortable with their framework and discovers how to best apply it, which of the following patterns do most teams experience? Teams pick and choose which parts of the Scrum guide to apply. No. We apply the entire Scrum guide. Fewer stakeholders attend the sprint retrospectives. No, we always want all the stakeholders there. Sprint lengths go from 2 to 3 weeks in length to 4 to 5 weeks in length. I mean, not really. Right? I mean, the length of a sprint really has to do with risk, right? If there's lots of risk that things are changing, maybe it should be shorter. If things are a bit more stable, a bit longer. The daily scrum takes place later in the day. No. The quality and success criteria used to define the definition of done becomes more rigorous and well-defined. I would say that's true because over time, the team starts to learn how the definition of done can impact their work, and they can understand better what needs to be included in it to help guide development. So yeah, that is definitely the answer there. What is discussed in the sprint review? The effectiveness of Scrum and the way it was implemented. That's the retrospective. Software development best practices. That's the retrospective. What was accomplished in the sprint and what has changed in the environment. Yeah, that's what you share with the stakeholders, what you accomplish. You present the completed increments. What was accomplished, yeah, and really the increments that you've added to the work. You never present an half-baked or incomplete increment. It's all of the completed increments. But the sprint goal for the next sprint, no, it's not even decided yet. So I definitely like that. What was accomplished in the sprint and what has changed in the environment. That's definitely what you discuss. Okay, a DevOps team is putting software into production that fails. Performance and security are bad. The development team says they only need to deal with functional requirements, not non-functional requirements like security and performance. So the development team's kicking back. They say, hey, look, we don't deal with security. We don't deal with performance. That's somebody else's job. So what's the best way for the Scrum Master to deal with this obstinance that we're getting from those pesky developers? Share horror stories from the help desk about the issues the deployed software is having. I might do that, but I don't know if that's what Scrum would prescribe. Make sure non-functional requirements are clearly articulated in the definition of done. That is important. Run CI tests throughout the sprint and have developers address performance and security issues that arise before deployment. That's not bad, but that's getting into implementation. The Scrum Guide doesn't really get into implementation, so I'm a little worried about that one, but I mean, that's not a bad thing for developers to do. Again, that should be the developer's decision, though. You're the Scrum Master. Ask the product owner to add new product backlog items that deal specifically with performance and security. No, I wouldn't like that. As Scrum Master, you should push back on the DevOps team and explain that non-functional requirements are not part of the development team's planning tasks. Okay, I definitely don't like that one. So we need two here. Ask the product owner to add backlog items that specifically deal with performance and security. I think I like that one the best, right? So we're actually putting a product backlog item in there that developers could work on and use. So, okay, so there we go. Those two are correct. Okay, next question. Which of the following is true about the product owner's attendance at the daily Scrum? The product owner doesn't need to attend the daily Scrum. I don't need to read the other ones. The daily Scrum's for the developers. It's the developer's time to talk about software development. It says it right in the Scrum Guide. There's no obligation for the product owner to be there. There's no obligation for the Scrum Master to even be there. It's for the developers. The developers start it, the developers end it, the developers run it, the developers organize it. It's for the developers. Now, if the developers so choose that they would like the Scrum Master to help facilitate it, then that's fine. If they think that it's better to get fast answers to questions by having the product owner there, then that's fine too. And Scrum embraces openness. So the openness value would imply that everybody's open to come to the daily Scrum. But fundamentally, it's for the developers. And there's nothing in the Scrum Guide that says the product owner has to be there. So the product owner doesn't have to actually attend the daily Scrum. Which of the following statements are correct about the Scrum events? Okay, some word salad here. The sprint retrospective happens after the sprint is completed. No, all events happen in the duration of a sprint. The sprint review happens after the sprint is complete. No, the sprint review happens inside the context of a sprint. Planning happens before the sprint. Again, all of the Scrum events happen within the confines of a sprint. And that's the last one. All Scrum events happen within the scope of a sprint. And that is the correct answer. Okay, question 30. Let's be honest. A team's developers are amazing, maybe too amazing. Not even halfway through the sprint, and developers are telling you, the Scrum Master, that they have not selected enough items for the sprint. Everything is practically done, which will result in developers being underutilized, sitting around, twiddling their thumbs with nothing to do for the rest of the sprint. What should the Scrum Master do? End the sprint and reconvene new sprint planning? No. Scrum Master doesn't have the power to end the sprint. Only the product owner can. Have the product owner add new product backlog items to the sprint backlog? No. Product owner can add new product backlog items, PBIs, but they can't touch the sprint backlog. That's the developers. Create a more rigorous definition of done so that quality will improve and it will require more work. No. We don't change the definition of done midway through a sprint. Maybe you can talk about that in a retrospective, but it's also not a way of addressing the fact that developers have completed things early. Have developers adapt their sprint plan, preferably with the help of the product owner, and add additional high-value product backlog items to the sprint backlog. Yeah. I mean, it could just make sense, right? Like Scrum is just a sensible, pragmatic approach to product development, to solving complex problems. If you have a bunch of developers and they're like, hey, we finished everything, well, then we just talk to them and we find out what the next thing to do is, the next most important thing to do is, and have them work on it, have them figure out some sort of plan to include that in their sprint. Like that. It's just sensible, right? Hey, we got everything done. Okay, well, what's next on the list? What do you think we should tackle next? What's the highest priority item? Let's add that to the sprint. Let's think about the sprint goal as we do that. Like, what else can we do? Add into, but yeah, they finished their work early. What should they do? Well, we'll find more work for them to do. I mean, other things. Developers should be given time to improve their skills, to do some study, to do other things too. But as I said, Scrum's just pragmatic. The Scrum framework is said to be immutable, which means you can't hear it, I think. Oh, which means it must be done in its entirety. But I don't think you can hear it either. Okay, Scrum is immutable. That means you must do all of it in entirety, or else you are not doing Scrum. Which of the following are required by Scrum in order for it to meet the immutable requirements? Daily stand-ups? No, there are no daily stand-ups in Scrum. Okay, not everybody can stand up. That is not racist, but insensitive term. Plus, the whole idea of a stand-up is that people will stand, that the meetings will be short because someone will eventually feel so much pain from standing that they'll want to sit. And using pain, to drive your meetings is not a good strategy. So we don't do daily stand-ups. We do sprint reviews. CI/CD, there's no obligation to do CI/CD. Again, remember, sprint is not a software development process, a software development methodology. It says right at the start that it's not just about software development. So if you're using Scrum to build a car or build a house, does the word continuous integration and deployment even make sense for building a car or a house? So it's not that. Sprint retrospectives are part, all of the above. Yeah, that's it right there. Again, it should be daily Scrum. So that would make that correct. Let me make sure we got, 31, we're all correct here. Okay, what does the slope of the line in a burn down chart demonstrate? Okay, in the Scrum Guide mentions a couple of different charts. A burn down chart is one. I think a cumulative work chart is another. You don't have to be experts on these charts. In fact, the Scrum Guide kind of says, look, you can create charts like these, but they're not the be all and end all, and Scrum isn't about creating graphics. It's about empiricism and lean thinking. So they kind of poo-poo the whole idea of these charts in the Scrum Guide, but they do mention them, and you might get tested on them. So one thing they mention is a burn down chart. That's the percentage of the budget, no number of story points needed per sprint to complete the project on time, no changes in the team's velocity, no the amount of work that has been completed compared to how much work needs to get done. Yeah, that is the burn down chart. So again, you're not going to get tested extensively on them, but it mentions a couple of charts in the guide. As I said, burn down chart, I think it's cumulative flow. Just look on Wikipedia, see what they look like, and just be familiar with what they do, and you'll be fine. A couple of easy questions to earn. Who is responsible for turning a sprint backlog item into a fully reusable increment that meets the team's definition of done? Not the Scrum Master, not the product owner, because they don't do development. They don't build stuff. The individual developer who takes responsibility for the sprint backlog item during sprint planning, the development team as a whole. Scrum's a team sport. It's the development team. You may have someone say in a sprint planning meeting, I will take on this product backlog item. I'm going to work on this. This is going to come under my purview. But if they can't get it done, if they fail to get it done on time, if they have problems completing it, that's a team problem. Like if I'm the Scrum Master and somebody doesn't get something done, my question isn't why didn't you get that done? My question is, why did the team let this person down and not come in and support them and help them to get it done? Because it's a team project. It's a team effort. So always keep that in mind. The development team is responsible for creating that fully reusable increment. Which of the following is not true about the daily Scrum? The daily Scrum is time boxed to 15 minutes. That's true. It's held first thing in the morning. No rules about that. Again, some teams don't start till noon. Developers are not expected to stand during the daily Scrum. That's true. Developers are expected to answer the 3 questions. Absolutely not. I believe the 3 questions, the reference to them was even removed from the latest Scrum Guide. The daily Scrum always starts at the same time. The daily Scrum's location is all the same. And I'm doing this inversely. So I'm supposed to be selecting what's not true. And so here we go. The daily Scrum is time boxed to 15 minutes and developers are The daily Scrum is, which of the following is not true? The daily Scrum is time boxed to 15 minutes. That's true. The daily Scrum is held first thing in the morning. That's what's not true. Okay, there we go. We got that one correct. Okay, the goal of every Scrum team is to produce a usable and valuable increment as quickly as possible. What's the best way to organize the members of a Scrum team to make them most productive? Have a strong team lead. No team leads mentioned in the Scrum Guide. Have a Scrum team be self-organized and collectively accountable for their productivity. Wow, that sounds agile. No sub-teams. Have individuals specialize in components which they're most familiar. We want cross-functional teams. We don't want siloed teams. So, yeah, self-organization. Make the team accountable. That is the way that we do things in Scrum. It's a team-based product development framework. Management stakeholders are not happy with the effectiveness of the Scrum team. Who should management speak with about this issue? Who is responsible for the effectiveness of the Scrum team? This actually comes right out of the Scrum Guide. The Scrum Guide says the Scrum Master is responsible for the effectiveness of the Scrum team. I've heard people debate that. I know a lot of people in the Scrum community don't even like that. You would think that since it's a team-based sport, that it would be the Scrum team as a whole, including the developers, product owner, and the Scrum Master. But no, the Scrum Guide says that it's the Scrum Master who is responsible for the effectiveness of the Scrum team. Who is responsible for reporting status updates from the daily Scrum back to stakeholders? We don't do status updates in Scrum. I'm not even going to entertain this. None of the above here. Who's responsible for reporting status updates of the back to stakeholders? That's not how we do it. We're transparent. we're open. The stakeholders can see progress that's going on through the sprint backlog, through the product backlog. They can look at the product as it's being developed. We do a review. That's how we provide transparency, not through status updates. The developers have regularly submitted code that they assert represents a usable increment, but on further inspection, the code does not meet the agreed upon definition of done. This has undermined the trust stakeholders have in the Scrum team, which Scrum value is hurt by this type of behavior. Openness, courage, commitment, respect, and focus. I kind of think there's going to be an all of the above, right? They've regularly submitted code that they assert represents a usable increment, so they're being deceptive. They're not really being open about what's going on. They probably know that it doesn't meet the definition of done. That's not being open about things. No one's had the courage to tell people about the problem or speak out. Not meeting the definition of done is a lack of commitment. It's disrespectful to the stakeholders and to your fellow members of the team, and it shows that you're not focusing on what's important. So to me, this just reeks of each of the above, and boom, there we go. Scrum values. Which of the following actions will result in a diminished trust and transparency between the stakeholders and the Scrum team? Choose one. Not completing every item in the sprint backlog. You'll never you don't have to complete every item in the sprint backlog. It's a hope of what you're going to do, but I mean, you don't always complete everything in the sprint backlog. Sometimes you complete everything and you add more. Using downtime during the sprint to study new technologies. Nothing wrong with doing that. Failing to properly estimate the correct number of points for a product backlog item. Again, there's nothing to do with points in Scrum, and estimates are just estimates. They are rarely perfect. That's why they're called estimates. Making an increment as complete before it meets marking an increment as complete before it meets the definition of done. That is not something that we do. It's not completed until it meets the definition of done. So which of these actions will result in diminished trust and transparency between the stakeholders and the Scrum team? Okay, I think what we're looking at here is marking an increment as complete before it's done. Okay, so not completing every item, and that'll happen. Using downtime to study, you're allowed to do that. Failing to estimate the correct number of story points, that'll happen constantly. None of those first three diminish trust, but saying something's done when it's not, that's a big problem. Okay, question 40, we're halfway there. A sprint burn down chart can be used to show the amount of work completed versus the work estimated for a project over time. What else is true about a burn down chart? Charts were mentioned in the previous Scrum Guide, but not the current one. No, they're mentioned in the current one. Scrum Guide discourages the use of burn down charts because they're not agile. It doesn't really discourage them. Burn down charts have always been recommended. No, not recommended. They're useful, but do not replace the importance of empiricism. And that's what the Scrum Guide actually says about them. I think that's almost a quote. Burn down charts are useful. A bunch of charts types are useful, but empiricism was what Scrum is all about. And that's what's really important. Okay, 41. When multiple teams work together to build a common product, they must have the same definition of done. That is actually true. That's right out of the Scrum Guide. That just makes sure that both of the teams are delivering on the same quality, the same set of standards. Scrum is a lightweight framework that describes an iterative and incremental approach to software development. Boom. That's what's getting you in trouble there. That is false. Scrum is a lightweight framework for solving problems, but it's not limited to software development. And any question on the Scrum certification exam where it implies that Scrum is tied to software development will be wrong. The people that maintain Scrum want you to think of it as a product development framework that can be applied to anything. And if they catch you putting it into the pigeonhole of software development, you're going to get a wrong answer. Sometimes a team has too many developers. Other times a developer just might not be the right fit for a development team. Who has the power to remove an underperforming developer from a Scrum team. People always think that the Scrum Master has all of the control because they are the master. Not true. The Scrum Master can remove underperforming people? Absolutely not. Only someone in HR can remove an underperformer? Not true. The responsibility to remove a developer from a Scrum team lies outside of the Scrum Guide. The Scrum Guide doesn't explicitly talk about it, but the Scrum Guide does say teams have the right to self-organize. And if there's someone who's not a good fit to the team, self-organizing and having that person put onto a different team or removed from the team is well within the rights of the Scrum developer. So it's the team of developers that has the final say over who is allowed to be a member of their team. Again, self-organization in Scrum. How does Scrum foster the idea of self-organization? By keeping customers and stakeholders isolated from developers. That's not open. By allowing developers to send status updates directly to stakeholders. Doesn't allow it, doesn't really disallow it, but that's not really a recommended practice. By treating everyone as an equal developer. I like that. By being an incomplete framework that encourages experimentation, doesn't encourage discrimination. I like that. By allowing developers to plan their own work. I like that too. And boom, question number 44 is complete. Which of the following would be responsibility a team's Scrum Master would fulfill? Choose two. At the sprint review, the Scrum Master identifies which backlog items have met the definition of done and which have not. I don't know, Scrum Master could do that, I guess. The Scrum Master coaches the Scrum team on the importance of keeping Scrum events within their time box. That's a big one. The Scrum Master helps to advise on and plan Scrum implementations within their organization. That's a big one too. I think the rest are wrong. Scrum Master will assign tasks? No. Scrum Master does not assign tasks. Developers set their own action plans. Scrum Master is responsible for updating agile tools such as Jira. Absolutely not. And right here, the Scrum Master identifies which backlog items have met the definition of done. Yeah, that's not a responsibility of the Scrum Master. So yeah, there we go. And anytime you see coaches, advise, mentors, facilitates, those types of words are things that will be correct about the Scrum Master. Tells, assigns, forces, fires. Those are not things that the Scrum Master does. Self-organization and self-management are two important attributes of a Scrum team. What is most important criteria for developers to think about when they self-organize into a development team? Does each team have a strong lead? We don't really have leads in Scrum. There's a good balance of senior and junior. Never mentioned in the Scrum Guide. Will each team be able to form a subgroup? There are no submarines in Scrum, so why would you have a subgroup? Will the team have cross-functional skills? That's what we want. Just a set of cross-functional skills. So as a team, we can build the product that is under development. Which of the following statements are consistent with the Scrum Guide's definition of done? The definition of done is a formal description of the state of the increment when it meets the quality measures required for the product. That one sounds interesting. I'm going to select that. Product backlog items that do not meet the definition of done can be integrated in a release with the consent of the product owner. No. Product backlog items that do not meet the definition of done can be integrated and released with no. If it doesn't meet the definition of done, it is not integrated. It is not presented at the sprint review. The whole idea is things meet the definition of done, and then we have an increment that becomes part of the final product that we're building. The definition of done creates transparency by providing everyone a shared understanding. I think that's like a definition from the Scrum Guide. Multiple Scrum teams working together must mutually define and comply with the same DoD. That's actually true. Multiple Scrum teams working together in a product must individually define their definition of done. No, if multiple teams are working on a product, they've all got to have that same definition of done. Okay. 48. There are 3 roles, or as the Scrum Guide says, accountabilities. The Scrum Guide doesn't use the word roles, it's just the word roles rolls off the tongue a little bit better. We got the Scrum Master, the product owner, and the developers. What are the key characteristic and responsibilities of the product owner? Choose to. The product owner is the one who orders the product backlog. Yes. The product owner is a single person and cannot be shared. No, the product owner can be shared amongst teams building the same product. The product owner commits 100% of the time to the Scrum team. No, not necessarily. Multiple individuals with product knowledge can share the product owner role in a Scrum team. So that is not true. So the product owner is a single person and the role cannot be shared. Okay, I think I misread that option. Yes, the Scrum Master, the product owner is one person. Your team can't have two product owners. Your team can't have two people sharing the responsibility of the product owner. The product owner is one person on the team, and it has to be one person with the right to make decisions, right? If you've got two people acting as the, do I keep saying Scrum Master? I think I'm getting just a little tongue-tied after the hour and 10-minute mark here. The product owner is a single person on the team. It can't be shared. There has to be one person that can make a decision when a decision needs to be made. One product owner. We've got a question. We need a fast answer. We can't have a committee of product owners that debate things. It has to be one person. So let's see how we're doing there. Yep, that is the correct answer. 49. What is the maximum recommended number of developers on a Scrum team with a full-time dedicated Scrum Master and a full-time product owner? The Scrum Guide says 10 people on a team. And of course, if you've got an individual Scrum Master and product owner, that leaves 8 people for development. So the team is 10 or less. But as I said, if you've got a product owner, Scrum Master, that means there's only 8 developers. The sprint review is one of Scrum's time box events. Which of the following statements do you feel best describes the reasons why a sprint review takes place in Scrum? The sprint review is a demo. At the end of the sprint, I think the Scrum Guide says the sprint review is not a demo. So demo is not a good word there. The sprint review is when the Scrum team and stakeholders inspect new, usable increments and adapt accordingly. Yeah, because they could see an increment and go, I don't like that, and the team has to adapt. They could say, I love it, I want more of it, but different. So they see increments and adaptation. Recognize the work of top-performing developers? No. Sprint review is a way of the product owner, Scrum Master critique? No. Yeah. Take a look at the increment and then adapt. That's what Scrum is all about. It's one of those places that are part of the feedback loop for Scrum. The Scrum development team is building a house, and the requirements for how the bathroom should be laid out are unclear. What should the Scrum developers do? Outsource the bathroom? Ask the product owner for clarification? Ask the Scrum Master to seek clarification from the home builder? Scrum cannot be used outside of software development. Of course it can. It can be used to build any product. The Scrum Master's job is not to speak to the home builder. We don't outsource things to third parties. Just ask the product owner for clarification. You do it whether you're building a bathroom or whether you're building a web page, right? You need clarification. You go to the product owner, and there should only be one, and they can give you the right answer. The sprint goal is finalized during sprint planning and cannot be changed throughout the sprint. That's true. The sprint goal cannot change. That is one of the requirements of the sprint goal. The plan of action, the sprint backlog, those can, but the sprint goal is supposed to stay the same throughout the sprint, and it's supposed to guide you in your development. Multiple teams are working on the same project. They share the same product backlog and PO. What's the biggest 2 concerns or challenges you, the Scrum Master, see facing the team? Okay, multiple teams on one product. That's a challenge. Teams must make sure they do not work on the same product backlog items at the same time. Duh. Multiple teams working on the same project must have separate product owners. No, they've got the same one. They must minimize the dependencies they have on each other. That will make life a lot easier. Multiple teams in the same project must have separate product backlogs. Nope, they share a common one. It's difficult to maintain clear requirements with multiple teams. No, the product backlog owner should be able to, the product owner should be able to maintain those. So yeah, minimizing dependencies and making sure developers are working on the same product backlog items. Scrum doesn't work if there isn't buy-in from the entire organization, including management. How do members of the management group in an organization that sponsors a development project support a Scrum team? The organization empowers the Scrum team to manage their own work. Yes. So the managers don't overmanage. The organization responds quickly to daily status updates. Get away from status updates on the Scrum Guide exam, Scrum Master exam. The organization must provide Scrum teams with resources that allow for continual improvement. Yeah, that would certainly help. The organization fully respects and trusts the product owner's decisions. Okay, I thought we were only supposed to check 2 here, and I'm like, no, that's correct. So yeah, those are the 3 correct ones. And having trust in the product owner is really important. When stakeholders second guess the product owner, or the product owner isn't confident in their decisions, they have to constantly go back to the stakeholders to get approval for things. That slows the agile process down. Okay, the Scrum Guide very briefly mentions burn down and burn up charts. What does a trend line displayed on a burn down chart indicate about the team's progress? How quickly the team is burning through money? No. How quickly other Scrum teams on the same project are burning? No. The amount of work remaining plotted against time? That is essentially it. That's what the burn down chart or burn up chart shows you. So yeah, it's kind of how things are going over time. The sprint review is time boxed. According to the Scrum Guide, what's the maximum amount of time of a sprint review? 4 hours? 15 minutes is the daily Scrum. 8 hours is planning. 4 hours is the sprint review. That's the most. A lot of my sprint reviews are 45 minutes an hour. Some are half an hour. Some are 15 minutes. They don't go more than 4 hours. The product owner and the development team are loggerheads over which product backlog items should be selected for the sprint. The product owner wants the highest priority items completed, but the development team insists existing impediments and unfulfilled dependencies make the highest priority backlog items impossible to start on. The development team has selected slightly lower priority items that can be completed this sprint. After 8 hours of sprint planning, the only thing the development team and the product owner have agreed upon is the sprint goal. What should the Scrum Master do? Well, this is a bit of a problem, but after 8 hours of planning, I don't know, have the product owner choose the sprint backlog items for the team? No, the product owner does not choose the sprint backlog items. Trust the development team to choose which product backlog items to make part of the development sprint. Trust is important in Scrum. Extend the sprint planning meeting beyond 8 hours? No. The whole point of a time box is it doesn't go past 8 hours. End the sprint planning meeting and start development after the 8-hour sprint planning time box ends, even if disagreements persist. Yeah, that's what you got to do. And discuss why the disagreement happened, how it impacted the development process, and come up with ways to avoid such disagreements in the future during the sprint retrospective. That's exactly what the sprint retrospective is before. I would also say here that they said they did agree on the sprint goal. It's something you have to do in that sprint planning meeting. And if the work being done is going towards that sprint goal, we should have a good increment by the end of the sprint. But yeah, that's the way I would answer that particular question. Let's do the cheat and see if we got it right. And boom, we got it right. 58. You're building a limo for the head of state, and security and protection of the occupant are important non-functional requirements, which must be prioritized at every step in development. What's the best way to ensure security and protection of the occupant are prioritized? And again, pushing away from Scrum being just about software development. It's about product development and solving complex problems. Outsource security and protection. No. Add a sprint prior to the release of the car that deals exclusively with security and protection. No. Build a special sub-team. We're not building a submarine. There's no sub-teams. Have the PO add features that pertain to security and protection to the product backlog. Good call. And add concerns related to the security and protection of the occupant to the definition of done. Product backlog items, definition of done. That's what we do in Scrum, right? That's how our sprints work. So that's the correct answer. Corporate stakeholders are very busy as multiple projects are going online this quarter. The stakeholders have asked to attend every other sprint review to minimize the number of meetings on their calendar. So they want to get out all these meetings. What does the Scrum Master do? Coach the stakeholders and the team on how to make the meetings more productive and positive. Okay, so add value there and make it more valuable to people so they want to come. I like that. That's just a good idea. Agree with the request of stakeholders as reducing meetings is in line with agile principles. You can't stop having the Scrum events. Otherwise, you're not doing Scrum. Darcy has an article called Scrum But on Scrum But. Scrum is, we do Scrum, but we don't do the daily Scrum. We do Scrum, but we don't do sprint reviews every sprint, right? Don't do Scrum But. Make sure you're doing Scrum properly. Educate stakeholders on the importance of sprint reviews and work to facilitate more engaging sprint reviews. Consult privately with the product owner and see if they will agree to fewer meetings. Now, educate and coach. Again, I can look at this question and I can just see educate and coach and be, almost positive those are going to be the correct answer because that's what the Scrum Master does. But yeah, you can't stop having required events in Scrum. That's never going to be an option. What are two methods for creating high-performing development teams according to the Scrum Guide? Managers Managers don't participate in the daily Scrum. As I said, openness is one of the values, but it's for the developers. Developers are allowed to choose how many developers will be on each Scrum team. They should be allowed to do that. Team leads provide there's no team leads in Scrum. Scrum Master does low-level, time-consuming tasks for the development team like meeting schedule and note-taking. It's not the Scrum Master's job. Development teams are allowed to self-organize and self-manage. I think that's what we want, right? We want self-organization, we want self-management, we want empowered developers. That's going to make them high-performing, that's going to make them happier, that's going to make them do their job better. According to the 2020 Scrum Guide, when does a sprint officially come to an end? When the predetermined length expires, when all product items are done, when all product back items are selected for the sprint are complete, so that would be the sprint backlog is done. When a full increment that delivers value to the client is complete. It's done when the time box is done. If you got a 3-week sprint, the sprint is done when that 3 weeks time box is done. Doesn't matter how much you did, doesn't matter how much you didn't get done. It ends when the time box ends, when the predetermined length of the sprint expires. Who on a Scrum team is primarily responsible for engaging and discovering the needs of the stakeholders and C-suite executives? Well, that's the definition of the product owner right there. We don't have project managers in Scrum. We don't have business analysts in Scrum. And the development team does development. The Scrum Master helps coach people on Agile throughout the organization. But the PO is the one who talks to those C-suite execs. Which of the following is true about sprint planning in Scrum? Okay, choose two. The sprint goal must be finalized before the end of sprint planning and cannot change during the sprint. That's 100% true. The sprint backlog must be finalized before the end of sprint planning and cannot change. No, it can change. Scrum is all about adapting to change. Scrum teams working on the same product backlog may attend another team's Scrum planning event. Yeah. And Scrum teams working the same product backlog may not attend. No, so that one there is just basically saying, look, you've got two teams working on the same product. They've got a shared product backlog, and somebody on the team wants to attend another team's planning so that people don't step on each other's toes and they can see what the other team is doing. That type of openness is embraced in Scrum. So Scrum teams working on the same product backlog may attend another team's Scrum planning event. Absolutely true. Absolutely doable. You may have an organization rule that says, developers can't attend meetings from other people. But that's your rule. And I would even say, if that is your rule, why do you have a rule that limits openness and limits transparency? You might have some deeper reasons to think about that. When should new developers be added to the Scrum team? During Sprint 0, the team size should be set for the duration of the project. At the current sprint ends, but the next one begins. when adding a new developer will help development continue at a sustainable pace, or when the project manager provides enough budget money for the new developer. So when should a new developer be added to a Scrum team? During Sprint 0, after the current sprint ends, when adding a developer will help the development team, or when the project manager provides enough budget money. People look at this and they're like, oh, well, maybe they do it at the end of the sprint. If you've got a new developer for your project, and that developer is going to help the project, you add that developer right away. Why would you wait? Right? Like, again, in Darcy's book, she talks about building a survival camp. It's like, hey, 3 people from the boat come onto land and they want to help you build a survival shelter so that everybody lives. When should they start helping? When the sprint ends in 2 weeks, possibly after everybody's died, or right now to help everybody survive. Right? Like it's not a difficult question, right? If you've got extra developers and they can help, get them on the team right now and get them working. Okay, which of the following roles or accountabilities do not exist in the Scrum team? There's no project manager. There's no team lead. Those are the 2 that don't exist. Okay, always working to the best of your abilities in order to achieve the sprint goal, and providing assistance to other team members when they struggle demonstrates which of the 5 Scrum values? Commitment. Extroversion, I think, is one of the big 5 personality traits, and so is emotional stability or neuroticism. Those aren't Scrum values. Focus and openness are, but that one is all about being committed to the goal. Which of the following is not true of the daily Scrum? The daily Scrum is used to identify impediments. We do that. The daily Scrum eliminates the need for other meetings. That's one of the hopes. The daily Scrum is time boxed to 30 minutes. Boom, it's 15. And the daily Scrum encourages quick decision making. Yeah, the other 3 are right out of the Scrum guide. That's why we use the daily Scrum. If the company you work for does not have an organizational standard that defines the definition of done, whose responsibility is it to provide a definition of done before development begins? The development team, the product owner, the Scrum team, which includes the Scrum Master and product owner, or the definition of done is formed from a consensus between the Scrum Master and the PO. It's a team. The team gets together and figures out what the definition of done is going to be. You can have an organizational standard sometimes, and then you take that and as the minimum and then customize it. But yeah, just get together and figure out what it's going to be. The developers are new to Scrum, and they've asked you, an experienced Scrum Master, who should start, lead, and manage the daily Scrum. How do you respond? Okay, so who manages the daily Scrum? Who starts it? Explain that the most senior developer on the team should start it? No. Explain that the most senior developer on the team leads the Scrum while the junior developer speaks first? No. Explain that the team leads the Scrum while the most senior developer speaks first? No. Explain how the developers can choose whatever structure they want for the daily Scrum. So who starts it is up to them. Explain that Scrum is hierarchy-less and doesn't require any specific individual to lead during the daily Scrum. Those last 2 are correct. Right? This daily Scrum is for the developers, and they're supposed to talk and chat and get things figured out, right? Yeah, when your friends come over to your house, who starts the party, right? I don't know, whoever gets there, whoever starts talking, whoever, right? It's like, it's up to them. They do it however they want. And they're all equals on the team. It's hierarchy-less. Question 70, I guess we got 10 to go. The sprint review is the second last event to happen in the sprint. Who is expected to attend the sprint review? The PO and stakeholders. Yeah, but more than that. Scrum and the developers and stakeholders, the Scrum team and its stakeholders, PO and management, stakeholders and the product owner and management. Yeah, the Scrum team and its stakeholders. Just talk about the increments that you created and get feedback on them. Create a feedback cycle. That's what we're doing there. What does the Scrum Guide mean when it describes a Scrum team as being cross-functional and a group of highly motivated professionals? Choose 2. The development team can outsource work. No outsourcing. The development team is made up of programmers, architects, testers, and DevOps professionals. I mean, it could be, but if we're building a house, it's not going to be very helpful. The Scrum team is responsible for all product-related activities. So if we're building a house, that still stands true. The team members have all the skills necessary to create value in the sprint, and that is true as well. So those two are correct. Okay, 72, the year I was born. The product owner is not attending sprint reviews and sprint retrospectives. The PO also seems to have trouble ordering the product backlog in a way that maximizes value. What should the Scrum Master do? Okay, just looking like coach, discuss, coach. I'm guessing that these are the three correct answers: coach, coach, and discuss. I'm going to click cheat without reading them. Okay, and there you go. And I just did that just to emphasize the fact that, like on that Scrum Master Certification exam, that's what the Scrum Master is supposed to be doing: coaching, mentoring, discussing, educating. They're not reporting issues to senior management. They're not replacing the product owner with a senior member of the development team. They're not removing the product owner from the Scrum team. We've got a problem with the product owner. Coach the product owner and help them understand Scrum theory and practice. Discuss the issue with the PO and try and cause the removal of impediments that's stopping the PO from attending meetings. Coach the product owner on the importance of ordering the product backlog, why that's important to the team. So there's some strategies there for answering these questions. Which of the following are qualities of a successful development team in Scrum? They're budget conscious. I don't think the word budget is ever mentioned in the Scrum Guide. They always respect the definition of done when they turn product backlog items into releasable increments. They know their limits and delegate difficult work to testing or quality control. No, that is definitely the correct answer. 74. Under what circumstances might the decision be made to prematurely terminate the sprint? When a self-managed team of Scrum developers realizes the work committed cannot possibly be delivered. That sounds good, but it's wrong. When the sprint goal no longer makes sense or becomes obsolete, that's the correct answer. When the Scrum development team's work needs to be redirected to new opportunities, no. When the product owner reprioritizes the product backlog, no. The correct answer here is when the sprint goal no longer makes sense and becomes obsolete. That's right out of the Scrum Guide. And that's pretty extreme. It's close to like the project's been shut down is when you're going to prematurely terminate the sprint. What is the best way to divide a large group of newly acquired developers into smaller teams? Create multiple teams of approximately equal size. Group the developers into teams of equal size based on their experience. Randomly assign developers to small teams and then allow them to self-organize over time. Have the developers divide themselves up into groups of various sizes with a maximum size of 6. That's it. Let the developers figure it out. Don't overwork it. Don't try to do too much. Let the developers figure out what the best teams are. Many people incorrectly assume the Scrum Master wields great power in the Scrum team. In reality, which of the following is the primary responsibility of the Scrum Master and the development team? To make sure the Scrum developers keep velocity? No. Make sure members of the Scrum team are on time to meetings? No. To manage the budget? No. To ensure Scrum is being implemented in accordance with the Scrum Guide. The development team bit off more than it could chew during planning. They've just told you, the Scrum Master, there's no way they're going to come even close to completing the sprint backlog. What should you as the Scrum Master do? Change the definition of done? No, we don't do that. While the sprint is going, have the product owner and developers negotiate the scope of the work being done so as not to endanger the sprint goal. That sounds good. Have people talk. Have people negotiate. Keep the sprint goal in mind. Scale out and assign some of the sprint backlogs to external teams. No. Inform the product owner prior to the sprint review so the stakeholders won't be disappointed. No, you just negotiate the work. You're not always going to meet every deadline. You're not going to get every product backlog item completed on time. When problems arise, you just talk, you discuss, you negotiate. Just keep that sprint goal in mind. How often should a sprint retrospective occur? After the sprint finishes, at the start of each sprint, as the Last event to happen during a sprint, at the end of a product release sprint, in every sprint except sprint 0. There is no sprint 0 in Scrum. There's no mention of a product release sprint in the Scrum guide. The start of the sprint is sprint planning, and after the sprint finishes, there's nothing that happens. After the sprint finishes, a brand new sprint begins. At what point in the sprint does the development team create the sprint backlog? The sprint backlog is created immediately before? No. The sprint backlog is created during the sprint planning, and that is the correct answer. It's during sprint planning that the sprint backlog is created. Now, again, sometimes people think that sprint planning happens before the sprint starts. No. Sprint planning is inside the sprint. The sprint starts, and that includes sprint planning, daily scrums, sprint retrospective, and the sprint review. Okay, and the final question here. Under which circumstance can the Scrum Master extend the length of the sprint once the sprint has started? The sprint can be extended equal to the number of days a product owner is absent. The sprint can be extended equal to the number of holidays that occurred during the sprint. The sprint length can be changed anytime prior to the end of the sprint, or the sprint length cannot be changed after the sprint is started. And that's the correct answer. You can't go changing the length of the sprint. Once the sprint starts, the length is determined and it can't be changed. That's just the way that it works. So let's do the cheat button and see if this all goes green. Indeed, it does. I will click finish and it says your grade is 80 out of 80. And I wish on you that you get that exact same mark on the Scrum Master Certification Guide, that you come out with an 80 out of 80. Now, as I mentioned, there's a few resources that you can use to make sure that you score highly on the exam. Number one, get Darcy DeClute Scrum Master Certification Guide. It helped me get PSM1, PSM2, and Product Owner Certified, and it's helped others score 100% on the exam as well. Make sure you read the Scrum guide over and over and over again, and get on some of the scrum.org forums and take a look at what they say. Now, again, if you want to do this exam on your own, there's links in the description. You will just head over to certificationexams.guru. It is there. And finally, I would say, why don't you subscribe to my YouTube channel for more great content? Sign up for my newsletter, join the Discord group, and have a lot of fun working with Scrum and getting Scrum Master certified.